I've never had a single Trinitarian answer one of the 5 deadly questions honestly. They can't show you a single teaching by anybody. Number 1. Where does God ever state that he's a 3-person being? 20,000 single personal pronouns. Where does he ever say he's a 3 of anything? Number 2. Where does Jesus ever state that God is a 3-person being? He came to exegete the Father. Show me a single instance where Christ teaches that God is a 3-person being. Number 3. Where do the apostles or a single apostle ever state that God is a 3-person being? Just once. One instance of a single teaching. No hints and riddles, a teaching. Number 4. Where are we instructed to believe that God is a 3 of anything? Trinitarians try to get you to believe in this all day long. Where are we told to believe in this doctrine? Anywhere. Number 5. Where are we instructed to preach a 3-person God to anywhere? Just once. Trinitarians do this all day long. They get up there and teach the Trinity. Show me where we're instructed to preach this gospel to anybody. We're warned throughout Scripture that somebody would come to teach a different gospel, and if anybody does it, they're to be accursed. We're supposed to go by what we're taught, not by what the later church nephews teach us. Are Trinitarians able to show you where God says he's a 3-person being? Never. You'll never find it. Are Trinitarians able to show you where Christ, who exegeted the Father and made the Father known, ever tried to make the case or preach a Trinity? Never. You'll never find a single instance. What about the apostles? Did they teach a triune God? Do you see them teaching a Trinity after Christ left earth? Never. Not a single teaching by anybody. Where are we told to believe that God is a 3-person being? Never found in Scripture ever. We're told to believe in the crucifixion, the resurrection, that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. We're never supposed to believe a triune God. Nobody ever tries to make the case for it. And where are we told to preach this gospel of a triune God to anybody? Never. That's what Trinitarians do. They teach you a gospel that nobody in the gospel ever teaches. And Paul and other passages strictly warn us about this. Be careful of false teachers.
An important point. Just because we can't fathom how God could be 3 in 1, that doesn't mean it is not possible or logical. A good example of this is seen in the study of Euclidean geometry. This includes the study of higher levels of dimensions of space, so the possibility of 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, or even 11 dimensions. Such things are completely impossible for us to currently understand, yet they are mathematically sound, entirely logical, and might even exist in some sense beyond our 3-dimensional universe. So just because we can't fathom what a 4-dimensional cube would look like, that doesn't mean one doesn't exist. As Carl Sagan explained,
let's consider a cube. We can imagine a cube in the following way. You take a line segment and move it at right angles to itself in equal length. That makes a square. Move that square in equal length at right angles to itself, and you have a cube. Now, this cube, we understand, casts a shadow. And that shadow we recognize. It's, ordinarily drawn in third grade classrooms as two squares with their vertices connected. Now, if we look at the shadow of a three-dimensional object in two dimensions, we see that, in this case, not all the lines appear equal. Not all the angles are right angles. The three-dimensional object has not been perfectly represented in its projection in two dimensions, but that's part of the cost of losing a dimension. Now, let's take this three-dimensional cube and project it, carry it through a fourth physical dimension. Not that way, not that way, not that way, but at right angles to those three directions. I can't show you what direction that is. Imagine that there is a fourth physical dimension. In that case, we would generate a four-dimensional hypercube, which is also called a tesseract. I cannot show you a tesseract because I and you are trapped in three dimensions. But what I can show you is the shadow in three dimensions of a four-dimensional hypercube or tesseract. This is it. And you can see it's two nested cubes, all the vertices connected by lines. And now the real tesseract in four dimensions would have all the lines of equal length and all those right angles. That's not what we see here, but that's the penalty of projection. So you see, while we cannot imagine the world of four dimensions, we can certainly think about it.
So if tesseracts in higher dimensions can exist, we can see a good analogy of how God could exist as 3 in 1, even though we cannot fathom such a thing within our limited three-dimensional understanding. For us, it is rather simple. Everyone is one person. But on a higher plane of existence, one could be multiple persons, while being one being. As C.S. Lewis said, the human level is a simple and rather empty level. On the human level, one person is one being, and any two persons are two separate beings, just as, in two dimensions, say on a flat sheet of paper, one square is one figure, and any two squares are two separate figures. On the divine level, you still find personalities, but up there, you find them combined in new ways which we, who do not live on that level, cannot imagine. In God's dimension, so to speak, you find a being who is three persons while remaining one being, just as a cube is 6 squares while remaining one cube. Of course, we cannot fully conceive a being like that, just as, if we were so made that we perceived only 2 dimensions in space, we could never properly imagine a cube. But we can get a sort of faint notion of it. And when we do, we are then, for the first time in our lives, getting some positive idea, however faint, of something super personal, something more than a person. So just like a tesseract would have characteristics we cannot understand or cannot make sense of in three-dimensional space, God, existing on a higher level than us, can have characteristics we cannot understand or make sense of in our limited human minds. Thus the Trinity is not illogical, just unfathomable from our perspective. Much like a cube would be unfathomable for a two-dimensional being, or a tesseract is unfathomable to us. How could something like that exist with all right angles? We cannot fathom it, but it is logical.